your bulletin, you're going to see Matthew chapter 6. We're not reading out of Matthew chapter 6 this morning. That was my devotions that morning when we were doing the bulletin. I was asked what passage are we reading. I thought, well, it's in Matthew chapter 6. Well, it's actually Matthew chapter 14. We're going to be turning to Matthew chapter 14 today. And the title of my message is Faith in the Storm. And we talk about going through problems in life and, having faith, but it's a lot harder than we make it sound. The story we're about to read in Matthew chapter 14, starting verse 22, is a story about Peter walking out on water. And a lot of times we look at this as a negative story about how foolish Peter is. How foolish Peter was to take his eyes off Jesus. And what a fool. But he was the only one who stepped out of the boat. Would you have stepped out of the boat? I grew up boating. A 16.5-foot Boston Whaler, outboard engine, 70 horsepower, because my dad at one time put a 125 horsepower engine on a small little boat. And as he was turning and fooling around with his friends, the steering shaft broke, and the motor turned, the boat flipped over, and the Coast Guard had to rescue him. And he lost all his fishing gear and his wonderful new navigation system and all that. And I was so glad I wasn't on the boat that day. But my dad loved that boat and fixed it back up. And my mom made him put a reasonable engine on this boat. And growing up on this boat, there's been times where we were solid fishermen. The storm came, and my dad just sat there on the boat telling me to get his rain jacket out. Where's my rain jacket? I don't have a rain jacket for you. Oh. So we sat there fishing, and I got nice and wet. Well, I soon got a rain jacket, and it would be storming, and we'd be fishing. The lightning and thunderstorm comes. Well, we're good. There's bigger boats on the water than us, and we went fishing. And never once in the storms or the waves of the ocean did I ever think, you know what, I'm just going to step out and see what happens. Now, my dad has at times thrown me out of the boat, pushed me out of the boat, knocked me out of the boat, and laughed. But never once I said, I'm just going to take a step of faith in this storm out on to the water. That's foolishness. And yet Peter did that. Peter had enough faith that during the storm, Jesus said, come on out. Peter's like, okie dokie. And took a step. And so I want to look at how we can step out of the boat. Faith in the storm. You're going to sum up my message in a sentence. It would be, we can step out of the boat. We can have the faith of Peter. Let's open with prayer. Father God, as we look at the story of Peter walking on water, I pray that you clear our minds of any distraction. Give me the words that you want me to say. Let us understand what you're trying to tell us this morning. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So let's read Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter came down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. And he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him. And he said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And then when he got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So there's a couple things in the story that I just want to point out so we can really understand what's going on. See, sometimes we read the Bible like we do a news article. We read it flat and say, "That's nice." You know, if you ever watch the news, it's amazing. They're talking about boiled eggs. Oh, boiled eggs are the best thing around. Susie, what do you have to say tonight? Well, there was a severed head found in the elevator today. I mean, they change from one thing to the next, and there's no shock or awe. And we read the Bible like that, where it's just, yes, there's a storm, walking on water, it's a ghost. But think about what's going on. They just fed the 5,000. And Jesus says, "Okay, guys, get in the boat. I'll meet you on the other side." "Well, where are you going?" "Well, you don't worry. You get in the boat." Jesus went off to pray. That night, a storm came. The wind was against them. Now, these are seasoned fishermen. They know how to work a boat, and they're tired. The storm is raging. The wind is forcing the boat to go one way. They want to go the other. And then about between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., all of a sudden the storm is hit. They're tired. They're exhausted. They're in the middle of the sea. And he says the fourth watch, which is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., Jesus went to them. Jesus decided at the worst possible time, in the middle of the night, I scare easily. I just scare easily. Because sometimes this is horrible. This is a sign of a mean person. I'll be right about to fall asleep in bed, and I can't see at night, and Katie will turn to me and go, "Rah!" I can't see you. It scares the junk out of me. I scream, "Ah!" And she's, "Ee!" Come now. Everyone knows that's not funny. We're all like, "Oh, Katie, come on now." But it scares me. In that middle of the night, if you hear a noise in the middle of the night, you're not like, "Oh, something must be here. Let's go see." It's like, go get a baseball bat. Go see what that's going on. So 3 in the morning or 6 in the morning, about that time, Jesus comes strolling out on the little lake. Hey, hey. And the disciples don't go, "Oh, there's our buddy Jesus." They're like, "Ah! A ghost! Can you see that?" "I wish I didn't see that, I tell you what." They're freaking out. They think there's a ghost coming towards them. And then Jesus says, "Hey, be of good cheer. It is I." Now that term, "it is I," we have to understand that this term is very similar to "I am." When Moses saw the burning bush, and Moses said, "Who shall I say sent me?" And God said, "I am sent." This is the same phrase that Jesus used when he was arrested. And when the disciples said, "We're looking for Jesus," and he said, "I am," and everyone fell down. This is the name of God. This is Jesus saying who he is. He says, "It's me, God." You know, Jesus. And Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come on the water." See, Peter knew that if it was God, only he, if it was the Son of God, only the Son of God could give him the ability to come to him. But he needed God's permission to do it. He was about to step out into the supernatural. He was about to do a miracle. But he knew if he was going to do this, he needed God's permission. And so when he says, "Lord, if it is you, come to me," or "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you. Give me permission to walk on the water towards you. If it's you, God, allow me to perform a miracle." You know, dogs are wonderful little critters. They're cute. They're furry. They lick you. They lick your ear. And they're like, "Oh!" When they hear our voice, a good dog will come to you, right? If I wanted to steal Lewis's dogs, and I said, "Come here, little doggy, come here," so look at me like I'm insane. He might bark at me, But if Lewis says, little doggy, come here, it's going to come and listen and obey Lewis. Well, we hope. That's the goal, that our dogs would obey. But the dog's not just going to randomly come to you without a command. If they're running around outside, they're going to be running around outside. But when they hear that command, come, they know to come back. Peter basically is saying this: give me a command. Give me something that I have to do, that I cannot disobey. You told me to do it, I'll do it. Jesus commands Peter, come. Once that command is given, Peter has to obey. He's either going to obey God or disobey God. And what does Peter do? He climbs out of the boat and walks on the water. But then, you have the wind and wave. Now, a lot of times we see pictures of lightning and thunder, little ripples on the water, a glowing Jesus and a Peter. But let's be honest, there's a big storm going on. The waves are whipping around. The spray is flying and hitting him in the face. There's lightning, there's thunder. It is scary. And Peter's walking in the midst of it. He's not like, I am spiritual. He's going, oh, what's going on? Here I am. Spray's hitting him, and he's keeping his eyes on Jesus, but the spray's hitting him. The waves are going around him, and he gets distracted. Oh, that's a big wave. Oh! And he starts sinking. And he says, Jesus, help me. And Jesus reaches down, picks him back up, and they get back in the boat. We don't know how far Peter walked. We really don't. We don't know if he walked 2 feet, maybe not even a step, or halfway to Jesus. We just know he walked, and Jesus was there to pick him up. And they got back in the boat. And the disciples were amazed. We have to understand that Peter stepped out of the boat, and we can step out of the boat also. The first thing we have to understand is that Jesus has a plan. Here it is. Jesus has a plan. Look at the first couple verses, verses 22 through 24. It says this: immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Jesus has a plan. Jesus set his disciples in the boat. Jesus said, you guys get in the boat and go. Jesus has a plan. People who have a plan know what they're doing. As you know, we purchased a house and we are fixing it up. I don't just go to the house and sit there and go, what am I going to do today? I'm going to mow the lawn. I don't do that. I go, Katie, what's on the agenda today? And Katie tells me exactly what we need to get done. She's very well organized. She knows what needs to come first. And so I trust her planning. I trust that she's going to lead me in the right way. And she says, you're going to do this today. And I do it. I have a plan. We've come up with a plan. I stick to the plan. She knows that we have flooring guys come. She knows when we're going to get paint, this or that. She has it organized. Jesus has a plan. Jesus sent his disciples. Jesus, the all-knowing God, knew that there was a storm coming. He knew he was going to pray. He knew his disciples were going to be on a boat. And he sent them out. See, we don't need to know his plan. We don't need to know the next step in the plan. We just have to be faithful to do what he asks. The disciples didn't go, well, Jesus, looks like the wind's picking up. No. The disciples obeyed. They got in the boat and they went. We don't need to know the plan. Many times, we don't know what Jesus has in store for us. Many times, it's confusing. Many times, it's hard. Jesus never says he's going to give us a great life of ease and comfort. We don't need to know his plan. It is not important for us to know his plan. We just need to obey what he asks us to do. Not only do we not need to know His plan, sometimes in the midst of the storm, we can't see Jesus. When the storm hit the disciples, when they're in the middle of the sea, they did not see Jesus. He was up praying. They did not see Him. This does not mean that He is not in control. This does not mean He doesn't care. And this does not mean He's abandoned us. It just means we can't see Him right now. Sometimes we don't see Walmart for days on end. I know some of you thinking, I go to Walmart every day, John. What are you talking about? I go to Walmart. Hey, Walmart, you can go pick up a toothbrush. Hey, you can go pick up some batteries, some chicken. But if you don't see Walmart for a whole week, does that mean Walmart has disappeared? No. If you haven't seen Walmart in a month, does that mean Walmart is no longer a store? No. It just means you can go into Food Line. If you don't see Taco Bell for 2 years, does that mean Taco Bell is no longer in existence? No, it just means you live in Troy, North Carolina, where there is no Taco Bell for a half-an-hour radius. Not that I know this, I'm just saying. Just because you don't see Jesus in the midst of the storm doesn't mean anything. He has not abandoned you. He is still in control, and He still cares for you. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean anything. And sometimes we're put through the ringer. Sometimes the storm is hard. Sometimes it's scary. You know, but it's never impossible. Jesus has a plan for you. Jesus has a plan for each of us. The first step of that plan is obey Him. He's going to tell you to do something. It might be something that is absolutely impossible to you. It might sound crazy to you. It might confuse you. But He has a plan, and He wants you to take that first step. And you know what? We don't need to know the whole plan. We don't need to see Jesus every step of the way in the plan. And you know what? We have to understand sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it hurts. But Jesus has a plan. Don't give up on Jesus. He has a plan. In verses 24 through 27, it says this. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw Him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. Verse 24, sometimes it looks like all is lost. They were in the middle of the sea, being tossed around. They were getting nowhere. Literally, the definition of all is lost. Everything is against us. Whatever could go wrong is going wrong. You know, I had an experience last summer that I had a car. We had a wonderful caddy, and it died on us. But that's okay. We got a different car. And I had this little Honda Passport, and some of you might remember this beautiful Passport. This thing was a beast of a car. It drove all around the country, and it was on its last legs. The transmission was going. But Katie went up to visit her parents for about 2 months, I think it was. And so all I had was this little Pilot. And I just started working here. And so I was traveling back and forth from Troy. And all of a sudden, I'm driving through Mount Gilead, and I can't go higher than 15 miles an hour, no matter what I do. There's no way for me to get anywhere. And I get to church, or I get to the association, and I'm just devastated. I'm like, you know what? I have a new church family. They don't really know me. I don't know them yet. I can't just go and say, hey, Louis, can you come and help me with my car? I can't go, hey, Matt, I need you to come and fix my transmission because obviously I broke it. I don't know what's going on. All I just know is, you know what? All that could go wrong is going wrong. And it's scary. It was very scary. Everything was against me. I was just sitting there going, all right, God, I just have to trust you. And a friend that he is now a friend, his name is Curtis. I didn't really know him from Adam. And you know what he said to me? He said, I have a car you can borrow. Here you go. He did not know me for more than an hour. And he lent me a car for a week. And I was like, man. See, sometimes everything seems against us. But we have to remember, Jesus has a plan. He has a plan for you. Though everything seems against you, He has a plan. Whatever could go wrong, it might go wrong. And we get tired and we're done. When I was stripping wallpaper, I made a big gouge in the wall, the size of my fist. I'm done. Cool down, go to bed. Sometimes we get defeated and we just feel like, that's it. I just have to walk away. But we have to remember, even when all seems lost, Jesus has a plan. Even when we are just at the end of our rope, Jesus has a plan. Also, verse 25, it says this, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. Jesus never leaves us. Even when we're like, it is done, I am done, Jesus is there. He never leaves us. He always knows our needs. And He always cares. Interesting in this story, the disciples are literally at their end of the rope. They're like, we're not making any headway. We're in the middle of the lake. The storm's raging. At that point of their greatest need, Jesus comes to them. Jesus goes, guys, I'm right here. Jesus never leaves us. We might not see Him for a while, but He's always there. We might not know where He is, but He knows our needs. Because remember, it's His plan. And then in verses 26 and 27, we read this. Verses 26 and 27. And when the disciples saw Him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost, and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. Sometimes when we're going through troubles, we don't see Jesus. We don't recognize Him. There's a story. There was a big flood, and the police came by and told everyone to evacuate. You need to leave. In a day there's going to be a flood. Your house is going to be underwater. You need to leave. You need to leave. And this guy said, well, I'm not leaving. I prayed that God would rescue me. Well, the water got up to the windows of his house. And a little boat came by. The guy said, buddy, your house is flooding. Hop on this boat. I want to get you out of here. Get your stuff. I have enough room. We can go. No, Jesus is going to save me. I'm praying. Well, that night the waters got really high and he's standing on top of his roof. And a helicopter flies by. A little National Guard guy comes zooming down. And he goes, sir, get in the basket. We need to get out. Your house is going to go underwater. This is it. We can't help you anymore. No, Jesus is going to rescue me. Guy's like, well, my name ain't Jesus, but you need to get in this basket. And he goes, no. Well, that night he dies. And he's in heaven, and he goes, Jesus, why did you rescue me? Jesus goes, you're a moron. Remember I sent the cops with big old speakers saying leave? And then he didn't, so I sent a boat, and he still didn't leave. Then I sent the helicopter. I should have sent a guy named Jesus to you. Maybe then you would like it. You never listened. I gave you chance after chance after chance. Why didn't you take them? I was waiting on you. See, sometimes we get so caught up in our troubles, in our storm, that we don't recognize Jesus. How many times have pastors heard this when saying, "No, we can help you"? "Oh, I don't need the church's help." Really? Isn't that what we're here for? To help one another? "Oh, I can't do that." You can't let the church help you buy groceries because you don't have enough money to pay your bills? God. John, I don't want to look like a handout. All you're saying is, I don't want God's help. I'm going to do it my way. See, we have pride. I have pride. And that pride blinds us to God's help. See, when we have a chance to get help, take it. It is God saying, "Here I am. I'm here to help you." He might send it in a form that we might not immediately recognize. It might be a friend say, "Hey, if you ever need to talk, I'm here." And you need to talk to someone. You're hurting inside, but you refuse to talk to them because you know what? Then they're going to know I'm hurting. They probably already do if they said if you need to talk. Accept God's help. It comes in many forms. But in the midst of our storms, sometimes we don't recognize God. Not only do we not recognize God, sometimes we flatly reject it. "I don't need that." As you get in the car, "Man, I really could have used that help." Sometimes He has to be blatantly obvious with flashing lights. And usually that's when the time when it's even worse than before. Think about Jonah. Jonah was told by God to go to Nineveh. Jonah went the opposite direction. Got on a boat, and God sends a storm, and sends the storm so bad that they end up having to toss Jonah overboard. Jonah goes, "It's my fault. Toss me over." He gets swallowed by a whale. God is being very obvious to Jonah. Preach the word. Jonah goes to Nineveh, preaches a word, and then climbs up onto the overlooking Nineveh, waiting for the city to be destroyed. God lets a plant grow to cover Jonah's bald head. And when the plant dies, God goes, "You don't get it, Jonah. How more obvious can I be? Swallowing you with a whale, covering your head. I'm a gracious and forgiving God." But our thick heads, sometimes we don't get it. We have to understand. It starts out with Jesus has a plan. He has a plan for you. Though it might be struggles, though it might be strife, though it might be hardship, He has a plan. He's not going anywhere. He loves you. He cares for you. He's going to help you. We have to have faith. Not only does He have a plan, not only is He there when the storm hits, but our faith must preserve us. Verses 28 to 31, focusing starting on verse 28, it says this. "And Peter answered him and said, 'Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water.'" To get out of the storm, when the storm hits, the first step is this: asking God for help. Asking God for help. When we have a problem, our first response should be, "God help me." He didn't say this. Peter didn't say, "John, Matthew, tie a rope around my waist and throw me overboard so I can swim to see if it's Jesus." Peter didn't say, "Listen, this is what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to go and throw an oar at what we think is Jesus. If the oar hits him in the head, it's not Jesus." Ready? No, Peter says this: "If it's you, God, command me to come to you." See, We need to ask God for help. We should not turn to our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones. We should first turn to Jesus. Now, Jesus, God might be using our friends, neighbors, and loved ones to help us. But we should first turn to God for help. Our first response should be, God, help me. Because remember, it's His plan. If it's God's plan, He's never going to leave us. That means He's going to help us. Not only that, we need to follow Him. Verse 29. It says this, so He said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Even if God tells you to do the impossible, follow Him. Even if it's scary, follow Him. Even if it is hard, follow Him. I always wonder what Peter must have been thinking when Jesus said, come on, come to me, Peter. As Peter is getting to the side of the boat, the other disciples are like, this is going to not turn out well for him. Let's see how this plays out. As you know, I have a habit of watching YouTube videos of people doing stupid things, like kicking a soccer ball filled with lighter fluid. They light it and they kick it, and then the lighter fluid spills all over them, and then you see a person running around with their pants on fire. It's like, what an idiot. The disciples must have been thinking the same thing, like, what an idiot. Hey, Peter, what is he doing? And as Peter gets to the edge of the boat, he's sitting on the very edge, his feet dangling. Peter must be going, here I go. But you know what he did? He did it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say, well, I don't know about this. He said, well, Jesus said to do it, so let's do it. And he hopped out of the boat. See, Peter was commanded for the next step of the plan. Follow me. Come out to me. Peter knows that Jesus loves him. Jesus cares for him. So what did Peter do? He followed him. He took the leap of faith. And then, in verse 30, we see what happens. In verse 30, it says this, but when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Even after we decide to follow God, that doesn't mean the storm is over. Satan's going to still try to pull us back with the sights and sounds of our problem. We might be having marriage problems, and you might see a counselor say, I'm going to love my spouse, and it's going to be fine. And you get home, the first thing your spouse does is throw a book at your head. And all of a sudden, all this determination to follow God and love your spouse goes out the window. Because the storm is still raging. You might decide at work that, you need to share the gospel with someone. And you determine, on your way to work, I'm going to share the gospel with my coworker. You get to work and your coworker says, I hate God so much. And I said, I can't say it now. They told me they hate God. The sights and sound of our struggle sometimes distract us from the fact that Jesus has a plan for you. He loves you. And our responsibility is to follow Him and not lose sight. Peter lost sight. Peter lost sight. And this is what happens in verse 31. It says this, and immediately Jesus stretched out His hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? When we lose sight of Jesus, He doesn't let us fall, go, well, you had your chance. Bye. He picks us up. He forgives us. He loves on us. And what did Jesus do? He brought him back into the boat. He moves forward. See, it starts out with Jesus having a plan, with us following Him step by step. And even if we mess up, we get back up and keep going forward. Jesus is going to forgive you. So many times that in our life we're going to sin after saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be faithful to God. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to use God to help me. But we mess up, we lose sight of Him, and then we just give up totally. New Year's resolutions, that's how they stop. I have a New Year resolution that I'm going to be super handsome every day. And one day I look in the mirror and I realize, oh, what happened? I don't just give up and go, well, guess I'm ugly. Could be ugly every day. We do that with our New Year's resolutions. All of a sudden we have a bad day, we just throw our hands up and no, I'm done. That's not the way our relationship with God should go. If we mess up, we get back up and God forgives us and we move forward. Because the very, very most important point, the very crux of the matter is this. Jesus has a plan for you. It is your job to follow Him. Everything else is a distraction. Jesus has a plan for you. It's your job to step by step by step to follow Him. You might not see Him, but He's still there. You might mess up, but He's going to pick you up. You might not know what's going on, but He cares for you. Have faith in Him. Step by step by step. And after the storm goes through, we read this. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And those who were in the boat worshipped Him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. When the storm passes, when we followed His plan, step by step by step, we are brought to our knees, praising God. God will bring you through any hardship, any storm, any problem, if you follow His plan. If you trust Him, if you lean on Him, and in the end you'll be able to say, praise God. I think of the children's message this morning. You did a perfect with this message. You had a storm in your life. You trusted God, and now you're here worshiping God. You are a living example of going through the storm and worshiping God. Lewis, you are a living example of going through the storm and worshiping God. We all have the same testimony. We can say, I went through the storm and I'm trusting and worshiping God. So when the next storm hits, why do we turn our backs on God? Why do we look away? Why do we say, God, where are you? He has a plan. He's not forsaken you. Have faith, follow Him, and be brought to your knees in worship. Let's pray. Father God, you never tell us that you're going to prevent the storms from hitting, but you give us a plan. That we need to follow you. We need to be faithful to you. We need to keep our eyes on you, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when it's impossible. We have faith in you. And when we do that, step by step by step, you lead us out of the storm into the calm where we fall on our knees and we worship you. Amen. This is one of the sermons where there really is no invitation. Because the invitation would be something like this. If you want to trust Jesus through the next storm of life, come forward. I would hope every one of you would stand up and come forward. Because if not, you're saying, well, I'm not trusting Jesus today. So there is no invitation. But this is the challenge I give you. And this is for each and every one of us. Regardless of what you think, this is for each and every one of us. When the next storm hits your life, because it's going to hit, remember, Jesus has a plan. Your responsibility is to not forget that Jesus has a plan and to follow Him faithfully, step by step by step. And if you mess up, because we know we will, God's going to forgive you and follow Him faithfully, step by step by step, until you're out of the storm and you can fall on your knees and worship Him. The storm's coming. I don't know what it is, but He has a plan. And our responsibility is to be faithful to Him.